Hello, everyone. My name is Alana Abbott, and I'm the head of product at miso Robotics. I'm excited to welcome you to our investor webinar. I'm joined with Rich Hall, our CEO, and we will be taking some of your questions. If you have any questions, feel free to use on the bottom right corner, there's a little question, and you can type it in and I'll read them out, and Rich or either I will answer. Before we get started and before we dive in, Rich, can you kick us off?
I can. Thank you, Alana. Thanks for joining me. We'll call this kind of a fireside chat, I guess, if you will. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here. I'm excited to do this. I've been looking forward to it and look forward to your questions. So I will kick us off. I'm Rich Hall. I'm the new CEO of miso. I haven't been here very long. I've been here probably about 10 months at this point. Actually, maybe 11 at this point. And it's been a really fun journey. I've been aware of miso since the beginning. I was an early investor in miso, so I've had either a front row or a second row seat to watch the evolution of the company, and it's been exciting. I left my last job about a year ago and kind of tuned back into miso and saw that they were at an interesting crossroads, and the board and our investor at Ecolab brought me in and said, there's probably something interesting to do here. So it's all brand new, but it's been really fun. I'll tell you a little bit about my background for those who don't know me, and then I'll kick us off, I guess, with a little bit of a discussion on what we've been up to at miso for the last 10 months and where I think we're headed. And Alana, you should feel free to chime in here and keep me honest, make sure I don't get anything wrong. So my background is I'm based in LA. I've been operating growth stage technology-focused companies for the better part of 25 years. My last company was called VIX, which I was also a founder of. And VIX is the largest Spanish language streaming service in the world. I sold that 3 years ago with my partners to Univision, which is now called Televisa Univision, and is the largest Spanish language media company in the world. It was a great outcome. To give you a sense for the scale of VIX, VIX has about 75,000 hours of content, which is a lot. It is I think it's still the most used Spanish language app in the US. I'll have to double check on that. And we compete with Netflix pretty much every day for being the most used entertainment service in most of the countries in Latin America. We, as a company at Televisa Univision, own about 92 sound stages throughout Mexico. We produce about 7,000 hours of live content there. Last year we were Apple's TV App of the Year, which is the first time a Spanish language app had ever won the top global honor. So that was a great honor from Apple. So I stayed for 2 years at Univision, which was my commitment, and it turned out to be a great experience. We spent several $1 billion growing the service. It went from already being kind of the biggest of its sort to even being bigger, and it really put it on steroids. And then I left about a year ago, primarily because really two reasons. One is I was missing the CEO chair, and as much as I liked working at a big company, I was a little bit miscast. And the other is that I really, to do my job right, I needed to be sitting in Miami, and my wife's family lives near Miami, and that didn't seem like something she wanted to do, to move across the country. And so we decided to stay here. And when I left, I reconnected with the guys at miso and the board, and learned about what the company was up to. And so they asked me to come in. And I think the reason they did was because the founders and kind of the early leadership had done a really awesome job of doing something fairly miraculous, which is standing up something from nothing and creating a product from scratch in Flippy. And the skill set, though, to take an early stage product and convert it into a commercializable product and then one that can really scale is a bit of a different skill set. And that's why I think the board brought me in, is to take some of the experience that I had as a growth company operator and bring it to miso. And if you think about my last business, on the surface it sounds like a content business, and I think there's probably some truth to that. It sounds like a international and kind of national footprint, and there's definitely some truth to that. It's a technology business, so we built the tech stack that you need to stream video at scale from scratch, and that's not for the faint of heart. And obviously what miso does is a technology company. And then we were a data and a distribution business, so we pioneered some of the most early and innovative distribution deals on the planet when it comes to streaming Spanish language content with many of the big distributors and providers that are household names that you already know. And I think miso has a similar opportunity. We can sell directly to customers through our internal sales team, and they do a great job of that. And I'll tell you more about those as we go today. But then we also have a strategic partnership with our investor Ecolab, which is the largest seller of cleaning solutions to pretty much every restaurant you've ever been in. And they have 6,000 sales reps that allow us to take what we do and accelerate it in terms of sales. So those dual sales channels are really interesting when we think about the distribution that miso has. And then the last part of what we do is data. So I don't know that miso has quite thought of their business traditionally as a data business, but in a world where proprietary data sets have suddenly become incredibly valuable because they're what you are used to train up generative AI, miso is sitting on that. As the first mover in the space, we went out and we started doing a lot of testing and pilots and trials, and all of that produced a whole lot of experience and learnings, but also a lot of data. And all that data is sitting there for our use. And if you think about Flippy himself, he's a giant data gathering machine. And so our ability to take that data and do interesting stuff with it, I think, is really important. The way we did that at VIX was we gathered probably more data about how Spanish speakers consume content than anyone on the planet. So device, time, what they watch, when they watch, how long they watch. And we married that with third-party data to create a US Hispanic household data graph where we can tell you pretty much everything about 99% of US Hispanic households. And we then take that data and we use it to make better decisions internally. We sell it to our advertisers, our non-advertisers, and we get a whole lot of use and revenue out of that. And I think miso has a similar opportunity as well. So that's my background. That's what I see here. Obviously, I think one of the things that we've done since we've been here, I'll start with product because it's really important to us, and because Alana's here, who leads our product management team. So as probably most of you know, Flippy kind of created the food technology space when he launched as a burger flipping robot 6 years or so ago. And what miso quickly realized is that burger flipping is both unique and complex. But then just off to the side of the grill, there is this far larger machine, which is the fryers. And when they looked over there, they saw a really big revenue opportunity, actually far larger than just flipping burgers. For us, it's about a $3.5 billion revenue opportunity for miso alone. And that's pretty big. And so going and automating the fry station is something that they very quickly evolved into, and I think rightfully so. And so Flippy is our signature product. When he migrated from flipping burgers to the fry station, they tried to change his name to something fry related. And at that point, Flippy had so many fans and it was a catchy name that the company just stuck with it. And so now Flippy's kind of taken on a life of his own. And I think it's probably helped create miso as probably the most important brand in food tech. Surely a first mover in the space. And, it's hard to estimate what a first mover advantage might be if you're trying to quantify it, but I would say maybe it's a year and a half or 2 years or maybe even more. There are some competitors coming into the frying space today which is a really great validation that there's a giant opportunity here. But there's still, several steps behind us. And quite frankly, I think that there'd be a lot of benefit in not being the first mover, because as a first mover, we make a lot of mistakes. And I'd rather somebody go out and make all those mistakes, and then we'll just copy all the stuff that they do right and be a fast follower. But that doesn't exist. So this is what we've got. But that does give us a ton of data, which is really important. And then it allows us to iterate on our product. So, Flippy is deployed right now. Publicly, we've announced deals with Jack in the Box and White Castle and others. We have a very full pipeline of sales demand, which we can talk about in a bit. So it's exciting. Having said that, we always have to keep iterating on our product. And so we've been able to take the data that we've learned over the last several years and use that data to create the next generation of Flippy. And that'll be out later this year. So around August and September, you will start to hear us talking about the next generation of Flippy. And that allows us to flip a switch with all of the incoming sales demand that we've got and really roll out, a highly commercializable product. So you'll be hearing more about that both today, but also in the coming months as we tell you more about that. But it's really exciting. We have a really top-notch engineering team that combines kind of the, I'd say, original early stage heartbeat and experience that has existed at miso in the past, with a new set of very experienced engineers from really big household name companies with really great track records. And I think the collision of those two things is a really interesting, creates a really interesting team for us. But they're moving very fast, very efficiently, and making great data-driven decisions as we architect the next generation of Flippy that will be out later this year. And when I came in, as Alana can attest, she and I spent a lot of time looking at other products that miso had announced and started developing. Some of those included Sippy, which is a drink-making robot, Drippy, which is a coffee-making robot, which was originally called Cook Right Coffee, but it seemed like it needed to subscribe to our interesting naming convention. There's Chippy, which was a tortilla chip making robot. I think you get the gist of how our naming goes with these things. But those were experimental early stage products that we were working on. And we took those and said, let's kind of move those off to the side for a moment. Let's create a miso innovation lab, which will be a lab that can partner with big brands and create really interesting experiments and explorations of use cases and robots and all the things that they want to do. But 85% of our focus is going to Flippy. He's our signature product. He's the guy that got us here. And I think the inspiration for that was, and Alana and I have talked about this a lot, I think that came from taking a page from the Steve Jobs playbook when he had been gone from Apple for a dozen years, and he came back and looked around, and they were producing 40 products, and he famously cut them down to 2 and said it was one of the hardest things he ever did. We kind of did something similar. And I think you have to earn the right to, do one thing and do it really well, and then you earn the right to really expand into other stuff. And so when we think about our innovation lab kind of off to the side, that's where we plant our seeds. Many of those will fail, some will succeed. As they start to succeed, we'll build a business around it in the same way that we've done to create the infrastructure to, scale Flippy. So I'm focused on that scaling. I'm focused on capturing the demand. The timing in the market is really fascinating, because if you pay attention to what's happening in the job market, restaurants are having a really hard time hiring people in general, but especially for the back of the house. The front of the house kind of innovated 15, 20 years ago with open table and point of sale systems and online reservations. And the back of the house has largely been the same for 50 or 60 years. And today, labor is a challenge, and getting labor is a challenge. There's 9 million open jobs in the US. There's only 6 million people looking. So even if we had 100% employment, we would still have a whole ton of open jobs. And restaurants are the #1 employer in the US. They are 2x what the #2 is, which is schools. And so this affects them in a far larger way than really any other industry. And so what we're seeing is restaurants are closing down because they can't hire labor who wants to work in the back of the house, and especially at the fry station, which is a dangerous, dirty, messy job. I don't know that there's that many people that wake up in the morning and say, I want to burn my arms today and smell like grease. And so if we can take that off the table and take that same person and redeploy them to a different place, it could be washing dishes, it could be front of the house. There's a million different places in the restaurant where they bring a lot of value. They can also have a far better quality of life. Couple that with what we're seeing in California, but also 22 other states, where minimum wage is escalating. In California, last month, we went to $20 an hour minimum wage in restaurants, and it has caused a lot of turmoil in the restaurant market. And you're seeing brands, big household name brands, shutting down restaurants because the economics don't make sense to operate in California. So not only can you not get people to work, you have to pay those people more than you're actually making in revenue. Restaurants operate on a very thin margin. And so when you start to impact that margin with escalating minimum wage, it makes it really tough to operate. So if we can take the jobs that people don't want off the table by automating them with AI and robots and the things that we do, it really is saving a lot of jobs in the restaurant business, and that's important to us. And for me, that's what motivates me when I wake up in the morning. I feel like we're saving jobs and we are improving the lives of the people that are in those jobs. And there's an easier way to make a buck in the world than to work at a startup. And so you have to be motivated by something bigger. And for us, that's really the thing that powers us. Not to mention the fact that you have to be wired a certain way to want to get up, go to work, and try to tackle these giant world problems that nobody has ever tackled before. And if you're really inspired by that, and I'm surely built that way, then there's a lot of really interesting things happening in this space accordingly. And so a lot of those market conditions have caused a whole lot of incoming demand. And miso has an interesting problem, I think, in the sense that I think a lot of startups, when they get to the beginning of the growth stage, they have a really hard time getting in the room with people who can buy their product. And that sales cycle is tough, particularly when you're sort of an engineering focused company. And there's a big chasm between those two. And it's kind of the point where lots of startups fail. Whereas miso sort of has a different problem, which is they've developed this incredibly innovative product that is really a very late stage prototype. And now they've got all this incoming demand because of market conditions and other things. And so now we have to rise up to meet that demand with a product. So that's why we've decided to go and create the next generation of Flippy that'll be out later this year so that we can service that demand. And once we do that, we believe it'll be like flipping a switch and allow us to really, roll out in a pretty spectacular way. And in the meantime, we've been building the pillars over the last 10 months that you need to scale a business. So some of those things are around, for instance, tech support. You can't put a product out there that the restaurant relies on and then not have absolutely amazing, top-notch, world-class customer and technical support. So we have invested a lot in that. We now provide 24/7 technical support in both English and Spanish. The metrics that we have that we measure our success by have been spectacular as we've invested in that team. We have a nationwide group of technicians that can service anything that happens that requires a physical visit, which is somewhat rare, and getting rarer. I think we're doing a really great job of fixing 80 to 90% of issues within minutes and virtually, because Flippy is wired with computer vision. And so therefore our remote reps can see everything that's happening with that machine in that kitchen. And it allows us to fix most of the problems remotely. So investing in that and creating that infrastructure, that's really important to building a scalable business. In the meantime, we've also done some other stuff too that I think preps the business for this scaling moment. One of the things we did is we have decreased the monthly burn rate by about 40%. We did about 30% last year, about 10% this year. We've maintained that. We haven't skipped a beat in doing it. I think that's the responsible way to operate a business. And I, as a shareholder, care about that stuff because really my job here is to increase shareholder value and increase revenues and to be very customer focused. But, in the world that we live in, where the capital markets have changed, you can't go and get too far out over your skis in terms of expenses. So we've done a good job of dialing that back, being more thoughtful and disciplined about how we spend capital, and really focus that on things that really move the needle, like the next generation of Flippy. And Flippy is an incredible product. It really is a game-changing, market-changing product. And so our ability to just make that better with the next generation, which will be really the most significant update to Flippy since he evolved from flipping burgers to the fry station, is really impactful. It will be, roughly half as small, which will unlock tens of thousands of locations that will be able to be installed in. It will be roughly twice as fast, which means that we can service higher volume stores, and that will unlock tens of thousands of locations. From a unit economics standpoint, the cost to manufacture those units will decrease substantially, and that will allow us to become profitable in time as we scale and drive revenues. So there's a lot of changes that the new generation of Flippy innovates on. We'll also be filing a large amount of new patents. So Flippy is based on 20 plus patents that are in our portfolio that are in various stages of being granted. About half of those have been fully granted. And now in the next generation, it allows us to take those patents, iterate on them, and create new patents. And so in a world where IP now means a lot, we are really focused on building that as a very valuable asset. So I will pause for a moment and let Alana jump in and correct anything I said that was wrong, or add anything that she thinks that I missed.
No, not necessarily that you missed, but I will pull from some of the questions in the chat just to dive a little bit deeper into some of the notes that you hit. The first being, so there's a lot of questions about kind of sales and our sales pipeline, but very specifically, one of the questions was, with the $20 hour wage rate increase in California for restaurant workers, has it helped to accelerate our sales and our commercialization strategy? And if not, what's our plan this year?
It has, in the sense that it's created, we already had pretty good incoming interest when I came in, but I think it's created a groundswell on that, where we now have far more incoming interest because of those dynamics that are created in the market. We tend to take our cue from our customers, and we let them make the announcement for when they've done a pilot deal or a rollout deal with Flippy. And so I will not jump the gun on any of those names that we're talking to, but most are really big household names that are really interested in deploying Flippy across lots of locations. And the more locations you deploy Flippy across, the more impactful he is. We are going to make some more announcements in the coming months about some of the economics around Flippy, around pricing and the value it brings. But at a high level, I'll give you a sense for that. Flippy brings somewhere in the $20,000 per month range for positive impact on a restaurant's gross margin per location. So if you think about that, that's $240,000 a year for a business that runs on a very thin margin. That's really impactful, because most of that drops to the bottom line. And if you think about that at scale across a big brand that might have Flippy deployed in 100 or 200 locations, that's really meaningful when you add all that up. That kind of all drops to the overall restaurant brand's bottom line. And a lot of these are big public companies. And so these companies trade anywhere from, 10 to 20 times EBITDA, which is, roughly sort of a profitability in a sense. And if you think about sort of the result on their enterprise value, simply putting a Flippy in a certain number of locations can create billions of dollars of enterprise value for them, which is really meaningful. So they're really interested in it. And that's why we're spending this time to just take a breath, take all of our learnings, put it into the next generation of Flippy, so that in a couple months we can start to service that demand. But I would say, I don't, in terms of quantifying the pipeline, I would say it's between a year and two of a full pipeline. And we are excited to be able to give a Flippy to everybody that wants one. And that's when I say a year or two in the pipeline, that's what I'm talking about. People that would allow us, if we said yes to everybody, it would allow us to roll out Flippies over the course of the next year or two, just as fast as we possibly can. I'm not interested in building a small business. I'm interested in building a big business that creates a big exit for the investors, for me, for my team. And I think the way we'll do that is by delivering a sound product to that sales pipeline. But man, the market is really our friend. It's really, really helped us. And look, success is a function of operating really well and getting lucky. And I think that we are now operating really well. And I think that we're getting lucky in the sense that the market is telling us there's a massive demand for this.
One of the questions that we could probably clarify is then why haven't we launched more so? And do we have pre-orders for the next version of Flippy? Meaning, are we waiting for the next version of Flippy to expand?
You want to take that one, or is that one for me?
Sure. No, I mean, either one of us. I mean, I think the short answer to that question is primarily yes, just because we see all of the value propositions that Rich mentioned. So it's higher ROI both for our customer as well as for ourselves. It means closer paths to profitability. It's also faster, smaller, cheaper, so it makes it easier to retrofit into existing restaurants, which is one of our value propositions. Which actually, speaking of which, one of the questions was, how does miso anticipate working with existing commercial kitchens? Does each vendor require custom build and engineering solution? So I think that's also covers some of the questions around our competition, meaning Flippy is not a kiosk. Flippy is not a self-contained unit. What Flippy truly is a value is it allows to retrofit into existing kitchens by going over the fryers and under the hood, which reduces the overhead for an existing restaurant. Fryers can be up to $50,000, $60,000 each. That's quite expensive if they had to replace them for a Flippy unit. So what we did was we looked at hundreds of locations that we've surveyed throughout our 7 years to try to see what's the smallest we could make it and the fastest to achieve that throughput. Anything you want to add to that question, Rich, before we go to the next one?
Well, I just want to, overemphasize what you just said, which is that Flippy is the only frying product on the market that's fryer agnostic. So the newer competitors that have come into this space have bundled their fryer with their robot. And the reason they do that is because you reduce the failure points, right? You're reducing the opportunities where things can go wrong. And so the challenge is that if restaurants are operating on a very thin margin, particularly franchisees, they don't want to go out and buy a whole bunch of new fryers. And what are they going to do with their existing fryers? Fryers are expensive, as you pointed out. And so our ability to just let Flippy fit onto their existing fryers and operate with those, it makes our job more complex, but it's actually far more customer friendly. And so I think that's a pretty massive differentiator for us when we think about scaling. I think the other part is that there are a couple other competitors that have come out with what are called cobots. So Flippy is a AI powered robot. It's kind of in a box, and that means that from a safety standpoint, it operates in this contained ecosystem. And if a human were to somehow navigate to get their arm or their finger or their head or whatever into that box, Flippy stops automatically. That's how it's designed. And that's how it complies with the regulations, which are very stringent about operating technology in, conjunction with humans. Some of the competitors have come out and said, let's do kind of a hybrid version, which is called a cobot. And a cobot is meant to operate in conjunction with humans, so not in a little box that allows that safety barrier. The challenge with that is that you run into two issues when it comes to scaling. One is durability. Because it's there in conjunction with humans, it's always getting hit and knocked and bumped into. And so it really has a hard time holding up. And the other is speed. So when you're operating in the same space as a human, you've got to operate at a much slower speed. And as Alana deals with every day, restaurants are doing $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million of volume. And
Yeah.
the last thing they need is a slow fry cook. And so what happens is those are great for kind of mom and pop operations where they're not selling a ton of volume because they move at a much slower speed. But as you start to escalate into kind of big boy land where people are actually selling a lot of food, they just don't hold up in terms of speed. And even for the ones that they've tried to deploy, what's happened is the humans just say, oh, this is so frustrating. And they just wheel it over, stick it in the corner, and go back to manually cooking fries. So I think for us, that's a place where I would say, if I was going to sort of hang a lantern on a place where our experience and our data has allowed us to create a more customer friendly product, it's in stuff like that, right? We've gone out, we've made those mistakes. We've tried cobots. We just know that they don't work when you start to scale them. And so I think companies like that are going to have a really tough challenge scaling it. It makes for a good video, but it ultimately is not what the customers want. And, we're really trying hard to be a customer focused company. And one of the things that Alana does really well is on her team is to spend a lot of time with our customers, talking to our customers, getting feedback, bringing that back to our engineering team, letting them iterate. One of the things that we did just over the last month, which has been really cool, is we decided to open our own innovation showroom at our campus here in Los Angeles. We've got kind of a 3-building campus, and now the 3rd building is one that is housing our innovation showroom. And it's also a restaurant. So you can come in, you can check out the original Flippy, all the original Flippy arms, all these really cool displays and robots and technology, not only from us, but we've even invited other people that have cool food technology into the space to showcase their products. So think of it almost as like a gallery type experience where you can come in, you can see, you can touch, and while you're there, you can get a burger and fries made by robots, and that's been a really cool experience in terms of showcasing what we do, being a little bit more accessible to our equity crowdfunding investors, having a place where our potential customers can come and not only see our robots operating in our robot lab, which is a really cool and mind-blowing and futuristic experience, but also see Flippy operating in a consumer-facing environment, which is kind of the other half of the equation too. But the last thing that does is it gives us the opportunity to take all of our engineers and have them work with Flippy in a live commercial kitchen environment. And so we now require everyone who works at our company to go and work at our innovation showroom and to work with Flippy. And then they bring those learnings back and they use that to make better decisions when it comes to the engineering and the product development. And so we get multiple benefits and multiple pieces of value out of that. And I think that's an example too of, being a first mover, really being focused on the data, really being focused on the customer. But then Alana, you and your team spend so much time also talking to our customers and bringing all that data back to us. It just allows us to move at a more efficient pace and a faster pace than any of our competitors. And remember, this is a really young industry. I mean, if miso was essentially the catalyst that launched the food technology space, and it's only been around for 6 years or so, you can tell that we're in the very early innings here. And so I think it's important that people remember that innovation is messy and it's hard. And if it were easy, everybody'd do it. And we're also seeing a lot of big companies too, back to what we were talking about with sales. A lot of the big giant food brands have gone and said, oh, we're going to innovate. We're going to create our own innovation lab and we're going to hire a bunch of engineers. And as it turns out, that's really hard. So now they're coming to us saying, I'd rather partner with you. That seems a whole lot more desirable. So I think we're trying to make better decisions, trying to make, more efficient decisions, trying to sort of build a more scalable business. So Alana, that's a little bit of a long answer for, for the question that you posed, but I think it's important that people sort of have the really big context for, kind of what product and sales mean when you put them together.
No, absolutely. And I think you covered a lot of questions in answering that, so it was helpful. The only thing I'll add is patents. That's another question of, we have, over 20 patents, around 26 patents around our technology. How do we plan to defend them was a question that we got in the chat, but I think it's also one of our moats.
It is. Patents are a many-year process from writing them, filing them, going through a whole bunch of iterations with the patent office. It's incredibly complicated. And I agree with you. I think it does create a moat for us. As the industry starts to evolve, we will see people start to infringe on our patents. And so as that happens, then we hope to be in a position to have enough available cash to be able to go and defend those patents, which just simply increases the value of those patents. As you start to defend, you're also obligated to defend your patents when you find out that there's a potential infringement as well. So while we don't have to spend a lot of time doing that today because we're still in the patent formation phase, in the coming years, we will have to do that. Having said that, it's an incredibly valuable asset. I mean, massively valued. In fact, it may be one of the most valuable things that we have. In the years ago, patents were super valuable. Then about 15 or 20 years ago, patent trolls sort of showed up, and patents, I think, decreased in value because there was just so much litigation around patents. People are just like, I'm over this. And over the last decade, that's actually come back. And so now patents are probably more valuable than they've ever been. And I think much of that catapults us into kind of this new world of generative AI and kind of the tech-facing environment that we just live in. And having those patents, I think, is, as you pointed out, Alana, a great moat. It really makes it hard for our competitors to come in and catch up with us because to the extent that they infringe on the things that we created, we are now in a position to go after them and to block that, which only increases the value of our patent. So we'll get into that in the coming years. And then, as I mentioned earlier, on the next generation of Flippy, we've already started architecting the new set of patents that'll be in our portfolio that we'll start to make those applications for. Obviously, we're not going to tell you about those today because they're kind of a big secret until we start to file our patents. But many of those are around AI. What's interesting to me is that everybody is talking about AI today. It's, every headline. I rented a car not too long ago, and it was a big sign on the wall saying something about the rental car agency's AI, and still can't figure out what that does to make my experience better. But miso has been writing AI code for 5 or 6 years, and before AI was cool. And so now we can take some of the work that's been done by other people in the AI space and turn it into industry-specific AI for ourselves. And so take the AI technology that we already have patents on, that we've already developed over the last 5 or 6 years, along with the publicly available open source tools that are out there that we all know about, ChatGPT and others, and sort of then add our new AI as we're going into the next generation of Flippy. And that's a pretty valuable and interesting combination. And what I think is happening in kind of the AI space is that the first phase, and we're also in the very early stages of that, but the first phase over the last couple of years has been what I'll call 5,000 miles wide, meaning like ChatGPT does a little bit of a lot of stuff. I think the next phase that we're going into is going to be 5,000 miles deep, where each industry takes those tools and starts to iterate on them and build something that is very specific to their industry, very deep, very focused, very unique for their specific industry use case. And that's what we're doing at miso, is we're taking the open source tools that are available to us now, and we're actually drilling down to create restaurant use cases for them that nobody else has ever done. So I think that's a really interesting, exciting thing that we're doing. And if you think about it, I mean, Flippy has architected a robot around a robot arm. And the robot arm is actually one of the most reliable things that we have because they've been used in auto factories for decades. But a robot arm is just a robot arm. What really powers it is the AI and the machine learning that makes Flippy smarter and smarter as he goes, allows him to do things like self-healing, for instance, so that he can know when he's about to break, so he can fix himself. So we don't have to have a human involved in that. Those are the things that are really leading edge that we get the opportunity to do every day. So I think patents, AI, like we are going into an incredibly frothy phase of that right now. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, you got to operate really well, but then you also got to get a little bit lucky. And I think we're getting a little bit lucky when it comes to what the AI market is and what the AI tools are. And, we can write code in minutes now using AI tools that used to take us weeks to write. And so we're leveraging every bit of that, and we're really building, I think, a really good asset base of patents and AI to, to play in that space.
Right. So one of the most popular question is, what benchmarks do we have to meet as a company to go public, and how far are we from that date?
So the good news is I remember when I invested in miso in the very early days before they had even done any equity crowdfunding. I thought, man, this is going to be a great company to go public. And so I'm sure that that's on the minds of other people when they made their investments as well. It's something I think about a lot. One of the things that's interesting over the last couple of years is that if you pay attention to the public markets, they've been in a bit of a turmoil when it comes to IPOs and taking companies public. And so really, until just the last 2 months, there haven't been any companies of much significance that have gone public in the last 2 years. And what you're seeing is a lot of companies that would have normally gone public sitting on the sidelines, just waiting for the markets to correct so that there's a welcoming environment when they actually do that. There was the SPAC craze. So, but that has sort of played out. And I don't want to get too technical on this call in case people are not aficionados of kind of the SPAC vernacular. But, SPACs were very prevalent a couple of years ago, and a bunch of companies that really shouldn't have been public, many of which were pre-revenue, ended up going public through SPAC, which is sort of a shortcut to the public markets. And most of those have failed, and they have not worked out for investors because you can't take a company public too soon. And if you do, you'll just create this massive burden of paperwork and regulations and transparency that just shouldn't exist for that type of company when you're in the scaling phase. So I don't think it, even if the public markets had been open over the last 2 years, I don't think miso would have been a great candidate then to go public because I think they were just too small. But as they do start to come alive over the coming 2 years, I expect that we're going to look at that very closely. Now, there's all kinds of ways to create an exit for a company and liquidity for shareholders. You could get acquired by a financial investor. Those are private equity groups and so forth. You could get acquired by a strategic investor. And there are plenty of interesting strategic investors in our space that I think are in desperate need of innovation. I could spend an entire hour talking about how this company, that company, that company are the blockbuster videos of our space and are desperate to be disrupted and need innovation in the worst way. And those are the people that, are potential strategic acquirers for miso. IPO, finding some path to the public markets is another one. There's all kinds of different exit options that, I think about every single day. So when the IPO market comes back, and I think we have seen some green shoots over the last couple months, believe me, we're going to be super, super focused on it, provided that it's the right choice for the company. You don't want to, like I said, you don't want to shove a company public that's not ready for it, because that's a bad outcome for investors. Investors generally have a lockup period where they're not able to sell their stock. It's usually 6 to 12 months. So if you push a company public too soon, then it actually works against the investor's interest, because you see these spikes at the beginning, and then we've seen all these things, all these millions of examples that where companies went public and then they, have immediately gone down and, are trading as penny stocks, and that's not a great outcome. As an investor myself, I've got a decent amount of money into this company from 5 or 6 years ago, so I really want a liquidity event for it. But we also have to make sure that on behalf of those investors, it's the right choice. So I'm focused on it every day. I'm focused on growing revenues and growing shareholder value, and I want a big exit as well. And nothing would make me happier than to go ring the opening bell at NASDAQ one of these days.
Okay. Another question that was, what is our product roadmap outside of Flippy, and is Ecolab a part of that roadmap?
Yes. So let me talk about Ecolab for a second, because Ecolab has been a really great strategic partner for us. And I'd say that, that's a place where I've invested a lot in that relationship. So to a certain extent, they were part of the reason I came here, because when they made an investment in miso, I think they rightfully said, okay, this is a company that's ready to start scaling. We've got to make sure that it's got the right bones in place. And they're a $40 billion public company, so they know how to operate at scale. And so, but, they're a big public Midwest company that has been innovating their business, but largely doing a lot of the same stuff for decades. And so, we move fast. We're technology, we're innovation, we're on the West Coast. Like there's a lot of things that could have gone wrong in that relationship. And I've spent a lot of time investing in it, spending a lot of time with those guys on their home turf to really build a lot of trust and a really good relationship with them. And so part of what we do with them is distribution and sales. We talked about that earlier, where we tap into their sales channel of 6,000 plus sales professionals, and that's a really, really interesting and unique and critical advantage for us that nobody else has. But also then there's a product development aspect to it that allows them to go out, talk to their customers, see what their customers want, and bring that information back to us and for us to co-develop products together. So that then leads into sort of the first part of the question, which is, well, what are the other products? So we're not ready to talk about any of our Ecolab products, except to say that Ecolab will decide when they want to do that, and we will then support them in those announcements. But that they've been a really great partner, and finding a development partner, by the way, is not as easy as it sounds, particularly if you're talking about a giant company that's been around for generations, because having a development partner that is beneficial to you means someone who will give you real-time feedback, not schedule a call in a month. People that you talk to every day, people that you trust when they tell you something. There's a whole lot that goes into being a good development partner, and Ecolab has proven that with us. We have some other development partners that we have been, that we've made some announcements around, some that we haven't, and also some, big, commercial partnerships, and potential commercial partnerships. So I think just in the last week or so, we've been talking publicly about how NVIDIA has come to us and has given us access to some of their very leading edge technology and given us the opportunity to integrate that technology into our products in a way that they haven't with anybody else. So there are a lot of times when being in business with big, giant companies that are doing really interesting things can be incredibly beneficial. And Ecolab has turned out to be one of those. In terms of some of those other products, we talked about some of those earlier. There's Sippy, Chippy, Drippy. We have been working on figuring out what we want to do with those. In the course of making those decisions, we will identify the right partners. We have some of those lined up. Some of those are in process and in discussions. Nothing that we're going to announce publicly today, but you'll see some of those announcements rolling out. But the Miso Innovation Lab, I think, is a really, really interesting place for us, and it's a section. Physically, it's a section of our robot lab in Los Angeles, and so when I go to the Innovation Lab, it's really cool because the stuff they're doing it's never been done. I mean, pretty much everything that we do here has never been done before, but the Innovation Lab is really the most leading edge part of that, and that's when they're developing ideas such as a Sippy or a Chippy. Chippy's an interesting one, actually, by the way, because that was an experiment that Miso did before I got here with Chipotle, and what we found is that Chippy that cooks tortilla chips didn't really need to be its own product. It actually is a better fit to just be a Flippy with a 1 or 2 fryer configuration. And that means we don't have to support a completely separate product. Now, we learned a ton of stuff through that partnership with Chipotle, and they were great partners, and we expect to be doing more stuff with them in the future. But one of the things we learned was around cleaning. Turned out it was hard to clean. And cleaning is a really important part of what we do because it is a very human-centric part of working with robots, right? All the cleaning. And so you don't want to save humans a whole bunch of time in the cooking part, only to add a whole bunch of time in the cleaning part. And so we learned how to do that. All of that learning and all of that data and all of that new technology that we developed for the Chippy product is now going to be appearing in the next generation Flippy product. So we get a lot of benefit out of that. But we also realized it didn't need to be its own separate SKU. So even when we fail, sometimes we actually really succeed, and that data becomes super interesting. So anyway, I will pause because I could talk about the Innovation Lab forever. I think it's one of the most exciting things that we do. It's also a place that allows us to engage from a sales standpoint, to engage customers and potential customers very early on in their thinking about innovation, because a lot of these companies have been doing the same thing for generations. And so they don't quite know where to start. So we become a place, a destination for them to show up and say, help me understand how to talk about innovation, how to think about innovation. How do I even go explore what it is that I need to innovate on? And that's where we do all that. We develop those products, we develop those initiatives through our innovation lab. And if I left anything out, Alana, please add it.
No, I think the only thing that there's a little bit of confusion around that we can clarify is what is the difference between the innovation lab and the restaurant. So Cali Express by Flippy is also near our campus, and it is the restaurant that operates, that shows our potential and current customers what it's like to be in a real kitchen. So they like to see the lab. They like to ask questions, especially away from customers, about cleaning procedures and support and field service teams, etc. But more than anything, seeing is believing. So what Cali Express serves as a secondary step, so separate building but very close by, to really see it in action and the meals that customers will cook.
And look, maybe there's a learning for us in that question, even, maybe in terms of because we call one the innovation showroom and one the innovation lab. And so while that may make sense to us from a public narrative standpoint, maybe we need to revisit how we describe that and the language that we use around that, because they are kind of part and parcel of the same thing. We do get a chance to experiment in our innovation showroom. But it's also a great place for us to go out and brag about what we do and educate the public on it as well. And so it is a little bit different, but both of them are very leading edge. And I think that's the takeaway, is that we are right there on the front lines every day. I'm biased, but I think we are truly the most important and most leading edge food technology company on the planet. And so the lab and the showroom allow us to innovate and showcase that.
Yes, and a few questions on the Cali Express specifically. It's in Pasadena, California. It's searchable on Google. You're welcome to come, and it is open to the public, so anybody's welcome to come in during our operating hours. You might even see, as Rich mentioned, some of our engineers or myself working behind the counter to interact with Flippy.
Or me. I was the first one, and I loved it. I'm going back in 2 weeks to do it again. I learned so much. I had a great experience. I intend to keep doing it. And almost everybody that has done it, that works at Miso, has come back with sort of the same type of mind-blowing experience. And so we're gonna keep doing that. But there's also one of the weird things that's happened unexpectedly and unintentionally is that we have two of the original Flippy robotic arms that are posted on pedestals, and they do a little synchronized dance to the music that's playing in the showroom/restaurant. And so we're finding a lot of people showing up, shooting Instagram videos with those dancing arms in the background, which is not what we intended, but it's fun to see creativity happening in there.
Absolutely. And since we're kind of winding down, so we have about 7 minutes left before the close, one of the questions has, how are we going to update or involve investors? Or will there be other webinars like this going forward, since we weren't able to answer any question, not all of the questions, we were able to answer most of the questions?
Well, I think investor communication is actually a really important thing that is worth spending a minute or two on. Obviously, we're here today. We're doing this. Communication is important to me. I'm a storyteller by trade. I started my career financing movies and making movies, and I believe in being very thoughtful about the story and the narrative, and it's something that I'm very focused on. So shareholder communication is really important to me. That's why we're doing this. If you have been paying attention to our emails, and if you're not already signed up for our email list, just go to misorobotics.com and drop down to the bottom of any page, and you can put in your email and sign up for our mailing list. But we have put out some Q&A videos, some with me, some with you, some with Bashir, our CTO. And so I think that's a really good platform to communicate with shareholders on. In those, we take shareholder questions just like we did here. It's just that we solicited them in advance, and then we asked questions and did fireside chats and created dialogue. So we'll do more of those for sure. We have been putting out, really trying hard to consistently send out things to our mailing list that are about the market, about, what is some of the innovation that's happening outside of us? Because I think that's important to understand just what's happening in the world and the ecosystem of food technology. So we did that. We just put out something the other day about Sweetgreen introducing robots into their kitchens. They've only done it in 2 kitchens, and it was a company that they acquired. But it's increased the margins in those kitchens by 28%, which is massive. And they're a public company, and so they have to publicly report a lot of this data, and we want to hang a lantern on that. So when somebody else does good, we want to be sure to pat them on the back. And so we've tried to communicate about that kind of stuff, just market data. We've tried to communicate about some of the announcements that we have that we want shareholders to know about. I've written several incredibly long and very detailed emails, and I don't know if everyone reads those, because they're not going to be for everybody. But for those that really want a lot of details, like I write those myself. We've pushed those out to the mailing list. We have a bunch of public SEC filings that we're required to do as an equity crowdfunding company, so that investors have full transparency. Those are 100-page documents, so we do a lot of that. But my intention is to keep communicating. I think it's probably one of the things that, if you've been paying attention over the last 10 months, you are starting to see a far more regular cadence of communication to shareholders than the company had done in the past. And so that's important to me. We intend to keep doing it. Obviously, we have a company to run, so we have to spend some time. That's really the most impactful thing we can do for shareholders. But we also want to be sure to communicate with people as well. That's really important to me.
Great. And there's a lot of questions in the chat I would love to answer, but we'll probably have to do another version. I want to also provide some resources. So a few of you have asked about further investment. If you go to invest.misorobotics.com, that has the link to go to Dealmaker, as well as some of the filings that Rich mentioned and additional detail. Also, if you have very specific questions about your shares, we answer emails at invest@misorobotics.com. So we do try to get through as many of those as possible within a short period of time. So please feel free to ask those specific questions.
And by the way, I'll jump in on that for a second too. That's another place where we've invested. So I was talking earlier about how we've invested in our customer and tech support, because that's what's required to scale a business. We've also invested in our investor relations support as well. And I don't know that Miso had been doing an excellent job of responding to its shareholders with very thoughtful, detailed responses when people have questions for us. So we've been trying to get a lot better on that. We're very focused on it. I know that we've still got work to do on that, and we're trying to get better, but we've invested a lot in that infrastructure and in hiring new teams to respond to those questions, to make sure that you feel heard. We also like your ideas. So we spend a lot of time talking about ideas here, but some of those ideas don't necessarily have to come from us. So if investors have ideas that they think might make our products better, make our business better, send them. Those will get to us, and so we want to hear those ideas. I mean, one of the really incredible things about having more than 30,000 investors, which we're honestly truly honored to have, is that we have this army of marketers out there that are going out talking about our products and talking about Flippy and talking about the company and feeling pride in their ownership, but also seeing ideas and hearing ideas and coming up with ideas and bringing those back to us. And I think that's a competitive advantage that we have that other people don't have. So I would encourage you to be communicative with us as you see those ideas, and we're going to do our best to be as responsive as quickly as we can do.
Perfect. Well, with that, we have about a minute left. So I just want to thank everybody for your very thoughtful questions, your insights, and even some great ideas that you might see in the near future.
But
So
at least
please
got your
stay
dog
tuned.
excited, it sounds like. So that's
Yes.
good.
Yeah. Sorry about that, but even that. See, this is the wrap up excitement. This is the version of applause that we might have. But thank you for being a part of our community, and we look forward to seeing you on the next call.
Thank you, everybody.